All right, welcome everyone. Thank you all for making it here to celebrate the life of Kyler Pallister. Many of you don't know me. I see a lot of familiar faces though. I'm Josh Apple. I was a friend of Kyler's for the better part of 20 years. I've known him and Eric and the Tundra that they all traveled in. And then I've also known Ryan and Chris Pallister. I worked with those guys up in Alaska. And so I've known the Pallisters, for a long time. They're great people. They're big, bold. They've got a lot of characters in their family. And they're hardworking and dedicated people. Kyler was a climbing partner of mine, whom we lost, obviously way too early. Unfortunately, it takes something like the loss of a friend to make you reflect on the importance they have in your life. We absorb the traits of the people that we look up to and try to emulate that quality in ourselves. And for me, with Kyler, it was the art of being humble, calm, and kind. Kyler was a staple in the climbing community around here. He established, as many of you know, countless routes around the greater Yellowstone area. Climbing the boldest routes that a lot of us, learn to recognize with him. But the one thing he never did about those routes is he never boasted about anything that he ever did. Kyler was always humble. He would never walk up to you and tell you what he was up to. Instead, he'd let his actions speak for themselves. And we all were witness to that. Kyler was a good friend, and he always was stoked to get out in the mountains in whatever capacity. Many times as climbers and skiers, we tend to have our own objectives about things we want to climb or ski or do whatever. Kyler was down for whatever, He's like, he just didn't really, as long as I think he was with friends and he was outside, he was happy, and he was trying his hardest. He was a true team player in the sense of a partner. There was always discussion about whatever you're doing, and I don't know, that's just was how Kyler always was. Just understanding of people's limitations, understanding of people's what they wanted to achieve. Kyler was extremely smart as well. He worked up at MSU for the last 15 years as a lab manager. He was encouraged by his colleagues and friends that he should get his PhD, and he never did. But I think he liked the freedom of not, I think he liked having the freedom of climbing and pursuing his other passions. Science was just one of those passions he had, of many. There was way more to Kyler than many of us knew. He was someone unique and beautiful to each one of us in a different way. He was not confined to one label, like a climber or a scientist, but he wore many hats and excelled in every hat that he wore. Life's cruelness is unrelenting. It's cold and confusing. Life is a struggle. That's the unfortunate beauty. You can't have the bright sunny days without the bitter cold darkness. I think we all learned something new about Kyler today from the many speakers that we have lined up to tell their own story about Kyler and the impact he had on their lives. I think we'll, sorry. I guess I'll just end with a poem that I have from a Native American poet. Regrettably, there's no name to this author, but I found this and I just thought it was a nice poem to end with what I have to say and lead into the speakers that we have here today. And the poem says, I give you this one thought to keep. I'm with you still. I do not sleep. I'm 1,000 winds that blow. I am the diamond glints on the snow. I am the sunlight on ripened grain. I am the gentle autumn rain. When you awaken in the morning's hush, I am the swift uplifting rush of quiet birds in circled flight. I am the soft stars that shine at night. Do not think of me as gone. I am with you still in each new dawn. And with that, I'd like to introduce the first speaker that we have today, which was Kyler's father, Chris Pallister. And I'll give it to you, Chris. Thank you.
Yeah, right. Thank you. Listen, I'm going to have a hard time making it through this, and I had a hard time writing up anything, so it's going to be kind of random and shotgun. But I'm sure I'll break down crying like I'm about to. So to cheer this up a little bit, I want to take a picture of all you folks. Everybody smile now. All right, hell, I'm going to have to go this way. I'm going to have to back up. Thank you. Thank you guys all for coming. I mean, he touched everybody that he ever met, and this is a testament about what kind of guy he is. And like a fool, I told my family I'd get up here and talk, because the rest of them said we can't do that. So I'm going to try it. See what happens here. I didn't have a printer at the ranch, so I had to do it longhand, so I don't know if I can even read it. The afternoon after Kyler passed away, my wife Mike and I were going to the funeral home to make arrangements for him. And we're driving through this kind of dingy, grim, half poor, half industrial zone where the funeral house was situated. And Micah said to me, she said, I know what Kyler would say right now. And I said, what's that? She said he'd say, this is a little sketchy. And it, like that, it brought a smile to my face, and that's exactly what Kyler would have said. It just hit me perfect, you know. So you'll hear a lot about how humble and Kyler was and how he didn't brag or boast. But one thing he did have, too, that everybody will probably talk about is he really had a funny sense of humor. So we'll see how that works here today. But remembering that comment made me think about, what would Kyler say if he was sitting up here right now in his condition and looking around here going, what would his comment be? And I'm thinking he might say something like, you guys sure screwed my lifetime carbon budget. Or more likely he'd say, didn't see this one coming. I didn't see it coming. I don't think any of us saw it coming. He's such a strong, vibrant guy. It just didn't, none of us saw this coming. I sure did. For a lot of years, my kids were into all this high-risk activity, and I'd have nightmares every night about my kids being in some terrible peril, and I'd be running after them, trying to save them, trying to warn them, and I'd always wake up right before I reached them. So I never knew what they were facing. But with the brown bears when they're fishing, the avalanches when they're skiing, the falling when they're climbing, the boating misadventures we had seemingly on a routine basis. Anything could have happened, but this was a killer for all of us. I know I'm not the only one suffering. Everybody in this room has got a hole in their life now, and it'll be a hard one to fill. You know, AML was never in my viewfinder at all. And it just, in hindsight, there was no amount of effort that could have saved him from anybody. And he tried and he tried and tried. And like Alice wrote, no matter how hard he tried, he just couldn't stay. And unfortunately, that's the truth. And I feel so bad for Alice. And try he did. He battled ferociously for 2 years with grace and dignity the whole entire time. Against the foe, nobody has survived. His immense community of supporters struggled mightily to help him throughout. All you people that helped all along, donating blood and the bone marrow registry and donor drives and all kinds of stuff. I mean, everybody worked their tail off to save Kyler. We all got beat, but we still have him in our memories. For a quiet and really a shy guy, Kyler had a vast army of friends. It's surprising that how many he had. And but I think his inherent kindness and generosity and humor had a great deal to do with this immense amount of friends he had. He truly paid it forward. And all of the support and love he received the past couple of years is a testament to his personality. It truly is. Kyler never liked being the center of attention. He hated it. And he never sought special treatment ever. He didn't complain. He didn't whine. When somebody else received it, he never complained about that either. And as Josh said, he never boasted. Well, unless it was in jest. I remember this after his first stem cell transplant, and he was back home in an isolation apartment in Houston. I was down there with him, and they were playing a lot of board games and doing crossword puzzles and things like that. And Kyler volunteered that he and Alice were playing a lot of chess. And I said, how'd you do against her? And he goes, I crushed her. She's 7 years old at the time, you know. I realized Kyler had a special spark when he was a little kid, like 4 or 5. And we lived in a neighborhood, and a lot of kids around there, and we had a daylight basement. We were on a hillside, and big yard in the back, so all the kids would play back there. And we had one little kid in the neighborhood was an absolute turd. I mean, he throwing rocks and sticks at the kids and just causing mayhem all the time. And one day he's out in front of the house on the upper level there, is working on my car, and Kyler came up around the corner, and he's just angelic little kid, bright red cheeks, you know, and he's carrying a stick about that long, about 1 inch in diameter. And I said, hey, Kai, what's the stick for? He said, it's my weapon. And not his sword or not his spear, not his gun, my weapon. And I thought, wow, that kid's planning something, you know. And he didn't ask for any help. He just was going to take care of this problem himself. And I'm thinking, some kid's going to get smacked upside the head with a stick, you know. But nothing ever came of that. But, you know, Kyler, and that reminds me of the Teddy Roosevelt quote, speak softly and carry a big stick. Kyler did speak softly. And as a grown man, despite his outward physicality, and I mean, he had the guns too, that guy was tough. It was his intellect and his quiet demeanor and his quick humor that became his big stick. It really was. I mean, he didn't have to threaten anybody or force anybody. They just loved him, and here you all are. I appreciate that. I remember when we were in Portland, we were there for a few years, and Kyler was playing outdoor soccer there. And he was I was watching this one game, and he was kind of like everything, everywhere, all at once. And I thought that, I came up with that, but apparently there's a movie of that name now. But, and so after the soccer match, I was talking to his coach, and I said, Kyler's kind of runs all over the field. And he said, he's relentless. He has endless stamina. He can run down everybody and anything. So I just let him pursue the ball everywhere on the field. And the flaming red cheeks and just, whew, man, the guy could really go. He had a drive and a motor that just went with it. He just wanted to stop. And it's no wonder he fought so damn hard when he got AML. He just wouldn't quit. And I know Kyler knew the odds he was facing, but he just went after it. And he just went through hell. Kyler never struck me as being overtly competitive, but he was internally driven to do well. It wasn't he wasn't competing against other people. He was just doing the best he could all the time. And he was like that always. And he just went after it. He worked his butt off, and he grew to be an absolutely wonderful man. But, he was always a great kid long before he was a wonderful man. He was a joy to raise. But I credit Jane, a wonderful mom from whom he inherited his kindness and to his brothers, who treated him with immense amount of love. Kyler had a lifelong friend in his brother Eric from the minute he was born. Eric doted on his little brother. And when Ryan was born, Kyler treated Ryan exactly how Eric had treated him. They were a trio. Eric and Kyler showered so much attention on Ryan that they had him walking by 8 months and running by 8.5 months. At that point, the Pallister brothers, as they became known, everybody in Anchorage just referred to them as the Pallister brothers, they were wheels up and often running into a life of outdoor adventures, and they had a lot of them. To their skiing, climbing, fishing trips, boating adventures, they developed a huge network of mutual friends. All of their rock-solid climbing buddies, and I intend that pun, became the core group that rallied to Kyler's side during this horrific ordeal. From that, I take it you should judge a person by the friends he makes, not by the family he inherits. By that metric, Kyler was a blazing star. He had a huge group of wonderful friends, terrific people, all of them. Kyler was truly the type of person we should aspire to be. The only worry I had about Kyler over the years was that at times he seemed lonely. He didn't have a partner. And I was thrilled when he called before Thanksgiving, before he came ill, because he said, "Dad, is it okay if I bring a lady friend and her daughter to Thanksgiving?" And I knew he never, ever once had asked to do that or ever brought a woman home with him. And I thought, okay, Kyler's done for. And I was thrilled by that. Unfortunately, COVID kept that from happening, and I didn't get to meet Fats and Alice until we were in Houston together under horrible circumstances. But what a wonderful lady. I'll tell you, really something. I'm blowing that all over, aren't I? Sorry about that. I hope people in the back have been hearing me all that. So, with that said, this is going to be kind of like a 2-minute Oscar speech where you get to thank a million people, so I'm going to do my best here. First and foremost, I have to thank Jane and Fats for everything they did for Kyler the last 2 years. I know they told me, both of them, that they would rather have been no other place than with Kyler, but I know with Fats, with a young daughter at home, terrible ordeal for all of them. Terrible. And, Jane was an awesome mother. She is an awesome mother to other boys. And, Kyler had a lot of love and support all the whole time. I want to thank his brother Eric for his love that he showered on his brother, for the visits he put in the last couple of years down in Houston, and for going through that ordeal with a bone marrow transplant. Ryan, the last half dozen years or longer, has been coming down here, spending time with Kyler and hanging out, fishing and climbing, or skiing and stuff, and they've become extremely close, and I just really appreciate all the love they've had for their brothers all along. And he loved Pat's father. Without him, we would have been in trouble in Houston because it helped us tremendously with housing. Without him, I expect some of us would have been living under a Houston freeway bridge in a tent. But, so thank you for that. Mary and James, they had an apartment there too, and every time they were out of town, they let us use their apartment for flow over. That was a huge asset for us there, and we really appreciate that. Javanka Voyich, Kyler's boss, and he loved her. He loved his work and everything. And I remember a couple years after he was working for her, I said, "How do you like your boss, Kyler?" And she goes, "She's awesome." And then actually, before I met Fats and before Fats and Kyler became partners, he was telling me once about going out to a ranch and talking about Fats and Alice, and I could tell. I said, "What's she like?" He said, "She's awesome." And they're talking about Alice, and I said, "Well, what's she like?" "She's awesome." So I think you guys should be the awesome trio now. But that was when Kyler said, "You're awesome, you're awesome." There's no question about it. And he loved Javanka, he loved his work, and she just was absolutely wonderful throughout this whole ordeal for Kyler. Micah, I got to thank her for all the time she went with me to Houston and propped me up and helped, spent time with Alice and helped move Kyler and stuff back, or move between the houses and everything. I couldn't have made it the last 2 years without her. And then there's people like Rich and Louise. I've known them forever, McCrae's. Rich flown down from Idaho to donate blood a couple times with Louise, and then he went down and helped me move Pat's and Kyler's cars and belongings back here to Bozeman. It's just, and I got to admit, or say also, thank you to all the people that donated blood all along, or platelets or plasma, and registered for the bone marrow donations. Rachel James, is Rachel here? I know she has some health problems too, but when Eric got hurt, she immediately set up a GoFundMe page for him. And the same thing with Kyler. All the people that donated, it was just absolutely wonderful, and we couldn't have survived the last 2 years without that. Crap. Then, in my immediate family, we have a ranch over in Boulder. Kyler loved to go over to the ranch and hang out with Seth and Danielle on the ranch, help out. And Seth and Kyler have kind of the same kind of dry, witty humor, and I think they just had a blast together. And I really appreciate the fact that they created a home away from home for Kyler, a place he could go and feel comfortable, and he did it a lot. And then I had all these brothers, and they all had some interactions with Kyler at one time or another, but I got to thank Uncle Josh and Cousin Bo for taking Kyler up in the Bob Marshall hunting, Josh taking him out on lion chases, Zach and Rick going hunting with him in the Missouri breaks, Uncle Greg taking him sheep hunting in Alaska. So he got a lot other than his climbing and non-consumptive uses. He got a taste of all the rest of it too. So then there's a vast array of cousins in this area, Bo and Cody and Casey and Jeffy and cousin Josh, all great friends of his. I really appreciate all the time you guys have spent with him. And then there's two guys from their childhood I need to thank. Mike Burmeister and Wes Gamfield. They became part of our family. And they too are rock solid guys. And they hung with our three boys, really truly became part of our family, just tremendous guys, and a lot of their character rubbed off on Kyler. So, whether you love her or hate her, Hillary Clinton was right. It takes a village. And Kyler has a huge village around him, made him into the man he is, and I have to thank all of you for that. All right. Thank you. I'm done.
Hello, everyone. Sorry circumstance. I'm Uncle Fuzz, I think number 9 in the big clan. But I want to say a little funny about Kai and talk a little bit about that. But I was just asked if I was a climber by someone out in the crowd. And I said, hell no, I'm not that stupid. But anyway, we had the distinct honor of growing up around Jane, the boys, most of our life. I also wrote a little ditty here, and I put it in my pocket, put the glasses away, knew it wasn't going to happen. So I'll wing it. But I never knew Kyler to talk down to anyone, say a bad word to anyone, about anyone. But nothing but a joy. My son Bo and I had the pleasure of having him go on a hunting adventure with us into the Bob Marshall Wilderness several years ago. And goddamn, if we didn't have a blast. I would say it was the most enjoyable trip I've had in there in 23 years. But I know he hadn't been on a horse before. And I was wondering how he would do. Well, he took to it like a duck on the water, or maybe like a Kyler on a cliff. But we rode 28 miles in the first day, not a complaint. I know damn well his legs were chafed and his butt was sore. But no, never complaint. So we got camp set up, and the next day we went hunting, and we weren't successful, and we were on the way back to camp. We were coming down the trail, and coming up the trail towards us was a ranger leading a mule. And I was in the lead, and Kyler was in the middle, and Bo was in the back. And we were all leading horses, and this guy, his name was Guy. Some of you guys might know him. I remember his name was Guy. He went to college here with Kyler. But anyway, I'd like trying to introduce myself, and he's like staring past me, like staring. I'm like, what the hell? He said, Kyler, what the hell are you doing on a horse? And he says, well, you know. But and we took off up the trail, and the guy was going along with us, and I looked back, and he was just like staring at Kyler. I thought maybe he had a man crush on him, but he was just absolutely amazed to see Kyler on a horse. But that was Kyler in a nutshell right there. He was just a surprise. Everything he did was just a pleasant surprise. And my description of Kyler was, he was quietly exceptional. Thanks.
For me, this moment is for honoring Kyler's life, which I'm so lucky and so grateful to have been a part of. I met Kyler through my best friend, Ryan. I met him through Ryan, his brother. I don't remember the first time we met or anything like that, but honestly, I was probably pretty stoned. I do remember looking up to him, and when he offered to hang out with me while Ryan was at school, I really felt privileged because I didn't have any brothers, and I thought Kyler was awesome. I didn't know it yet, but Kyler was going to step in and sort of be my big brother at the same time he was being Ryan's. You see, Ryan is okay at some things, but he is terrible at math and most other things. So Kyler had stepped up to tutor him, and so while me and Kyler would go climbing and ski together, Ryan was just doing math with him. I definitely had the better deal during that time, and Ryan was a little bit jealous. One of his many faults. So I felt like I had brothers, and that includes Eric and Mike Burmeister, who I feel the same way about. We had a lot of fun. We had a lot of fun tearing it up at Wiener Lake and Hatcher's Pass and Turnagain. And I have a lot of great memories from those days. Shooting fireworks up Mike's leg. When Kyler threw my ferret, Farfel, on top of the flat top cabin roof and it screeched down and he caught it and just kept on rocking and rolling. When he plugged up the incinerator on the same night. We had a really good time, and it's important for me to say now that I felt very safe around him. And that's not a joke. I really did. He saved my ass a bunch of times. He really did. I kind of felt like he was looking out for everybody in a good way. And I felt like I could be myself, and for me as a kid, that wasn't always so easy. Excuse me. So I really grew to appreciate him. And even when he left and moved to Montana, I always thought this is someone who I would always have in my life. At least tangentially through Ryan. But I'm heartbroken that I won't get to see him again. So I guess what I want to say is thank you to everyone that made Kyler who he was. Because he was a really, really good guy. And I loved him. Thank you specifically to Jane and Chris, who did the easy part. And then the important part of raising him. Thank you for giving him food and water and giving him a good education and allowing him to be the person he was. Thank you for Ryan, for all of your multitudes of faults. You did share him. And Ryan, I know you love your brother and you're protective of him, so I appreciate that. Thank you to Eric and Mike. You all know I love you guys too. And I really want to thank Fats. You took care of Kyler during his last 2 years, and he deserved that. He helped take care of me when I needed it, and although it was very different, you took care of him, and I'm sure the comfort and love you gave him made his last 2 years more bearable. I'm sorry for your loss, but I'm so grateful for you and what you did for him. I'm sorry. Thank you, guys.
The next speaker is Javanka. Are you out there? There you are.
All right, well, I was blessed to be able to have Kyler in my lab since 2008. Sorry, 15 years. And as the group has said, just a remarkable character. And every time you're around him, it was something new. And so I'll just give you a little overview of what a day is for Kyler in the lab. Comes in the morning, if he was worrying, I should say, Tyler Nygaard introduced me to Kyler. And Tyler came into the lab and he said, I've got this really great friend. He's super reliable, he's super smart. We were talking about the lab and he was wondering if he could get some hours. And I was like, sure. And Tyler says to me, you won't have to spend any time with him. He's like, I'll take care of him, it's not gonna be any time. So that turned into, of course, 15 years of after that. But he comes, so a normal day, Kyler would come to work, draw blood, set up what we call neutrophil preps, grow bacteria, which were Staph aureus or strep pyogenes, set up these experiments, train students from undergrad to postdoc. In Kyler's time, we had over 100 interns. Every one of those interns went through Kyler. And it was well known. It was like, if you're going to Javanka's lab, you're working with Kyler. You're going through Kyler, which everybody loved. But, so he would work with the interns, set up these experiments, run animal experiments. He was responsible for all of our compliance. So he was responsible for human subjects, biosafety, animal safety, all of it. So his job was truly, you know, a true manager. Some labs don't run like that where they have the manager doing everything, and I did. And it was kind of like what his uncle said, quietly exceptional, I think you said, right? That's exactly what he was, quietly exceptional. So I'm gonna tell 3 little stories here of Kyler. And Kyler would call them vignettes, I'm pretty sure. And so the first one is the scofflaw. So those of you who know that term, it means to scoff at the law, right? So Kyler, there was somewhere between the white van, which was like the snowflake van, that he had to use the defroster cans in order to go to the ranch or go anywhere because it had no heat. And it was Tyler Nygaard's Subaru, I think, after that he ended up burning to the ground. Somewhere between those two, he was without a vehicle. So my husband and I had this old Toyota Hilux. And my husband Gary said, well, give the Hilux to Kyler. He can drive it, we're not using it. And I said, yeah, that's a good idea. So Kyler comes in and he's bummed, he's getting dropped off by friends. And I said, hey, you can have the Toyota. And he's just stoked, right? So the first day I give him the keys, he's coming around, and the old lab, you could see everybody driving in, coming around driving, and in comes Tyler Nygaard into my office full speed, and he goes, you've made a terrible mistake. And I go, what are you talking about? He goes, I vouched for him as a great guy, really smart, your vehicle will be trashed. He said he trashes every vehicle. And so I was like, well, what the heck am I gonna do now? Like, he's all excited, he has this vehicle. So I'm sure, Eric, you probably remember going to 10 sleep in that old Toyota. I mean, it was a perfect vehicle for him. And then the parking tickets started showing up. So I get a parking ticket, I pay for it. I get another parking ticket, I pay for it. I get another parking ticket, I pay for it. Now this is, remember, he's had this for multiple weeks. Like, I think he had the truck for about 6 months. And so I go to my husband, I go, what is your problem? I was like, I keep paying these parking tickets. I was like, can't you figure out where to park? And my husband, Gary, says to me, what are you talking about? I've paid 2 of yours. Neither one of us were looking that it said the Toyota, right? So we're just paying these parking tickets and Kyler's just throwing them in the garbage. So I come into work and I say to Kyler, I was like, Kyler, have you been getting parking tickets? And he goes, who wants to know? Needless to say, he returned that truck, perfect condition. It was with a full tank of gas and 2 chocolate bars. So it worked out just fine. The next vignette is a little bit more about him in the workplace. I'll call this one the CDC, and it makes me a little nervous because I can see my compliance buddies are actually here in the audience. But I think the statute of limitation is done with this one. So yeah, give Kirk a little tap there. So I had Kyler, in my infinite wisdom, I decided to put Kyler on a project that was to purify a toxin called staphylococcal enterotoxin C. Now I studied staph for many years. I knew that if you were going to purify toxins out of staph, you had to have all these rules in place. What I didn't know was that staph had 2 enterotoxins that were listed on the CDC Category B list, which is agents of basically mass destruction. And they had moved SEC onto the Category B list for an agent that can cause moderate morbidity and low mortality. So they were worried people would produce it, get everybody sick as a bioterrorist agent. So I thought this was before, I didn't realize that it was on the CDC list. I had Kyler working away on it. Kyler was doing great. The only other person on this project was Tyler Nygaard. And Tyler had left because he went to a postdoc. So what we were doing is we were actually producing this toxin in the lab. We were doing experiments and we were getting ready to get a paper, and I was like, we have figured out why staph is so virulent. We got this. And then I get a knock on the door, and it's the CDC. And they're all dressed in black, and they're not impressed with me at all. They come into my office and they say, we need to talk to, are you Javanka Voyich? I said, yes. And they said, can you take us into your lab? So I have no time to prep Kyler. So I go upstairs to the lab because they want to talk to Kyler Pallister, and they want to talk to Tyler, but Tyler's gone, so they only get Kyler. And they say to I walk in, Kyler sees me in with these two women with their black suits on, and he says, he's listening to something like back in the day when he liked that band Bat for Lashes. It's like blaring in the lab, and he looks at me and he goes, proper, and I go, and I look at him, and I said to him, I go, corporate, and he says, and all of a sudden he kind of like straightens up, he shuts off his music, and he says, and I don't know if some of you remember Kyler when he would do his, like, when he would be proper, when he would be like do it his like little kind of like I'm buttoned up, I'm ready to go, and it was funny. And so he now realizes that I've got something going on. And I said, hey, these women are from the CDC, Kyler, and they want to talk to you about the SEC project. And he's like, oh, sure, yeah, pardon me, what would you like to know? And he's doing all this. And he's looking at me, and he's like, the mumbling. We all know the mumbling, right? But it was a stable strategy because he would go like, are we screwed here, or what's going on? And I go, no, we're doing okay. What do you guys need to know? So what they did is they came in, and they try to see if you're not on the same page, right? So they're asking me questions, and then later they're going to follow up if Kyler's notebook, I match it, right? So it's really like dangerous. We had no prep at all for this. And then the whole thing, they're threatening a $250,000 fine, jail time. They're like making all these things if, we can't have everything match that we said we did. So Kyler, I said, I think we have all of the samples, they're all in the -80. And Kyler goes, 4 degrees, like that. And I go, and the lady, I remember she looked and she said, excuse me, to Kyler. And Kyler goes, I think I'm getting a bit of a cold. and those of you who've been around Kyler, you know how we can go into this like little mode. And I'm like, oh my God, like what, we are going to be so screwed here. So they lock the freezers, they lock the refrigerators, and they confiscate Kyler's notebooks. And what they're looking for is if Kyler's notebooks match what's in the freezer and in the refrigerator. So they were perfect. And this never happens. And I produced 4 mils of the toxin. I gave 2 mils to so-and-so to put in an assay. I destroyed 2 mils. They were spot on. So what Kyler got on that, I remember getting called into the VPR's office, and they said, we are so happy that you were stupid, but they said, we're so happy that you had all your books right. And they couldn't get over that Kyler had everything matching. And you're talking days and where it went. I mean, he was so good at detail. It makes sense with him being such a good climber. He was so good at detail. And in the end, they decided that he should be on the biosafety committee. and he was on the biosafety committee for the rest of his career. And that biosafety committee was made up of, at MSU, it's all the officers, the biosafety officers, so the safety and risk, faculty, and Kyler. And you know how you say he hated public speaking, but he would get up there and he'd do his little corporate thing and he would present those protocols like nothing. So Kyler saved the university, and also we got him working on some public speaking, which he hated. So the last vignette I will do is called The View. So Kyler had nicknames for everyone. Everyone had a nickname. In the lab, there was El Guapo and Delish and the Big Rabowski and Bootsy Collins and T-Easy, T-Queasy, Ty-Nye the Science Guy, Roz Trent, the Reverend. I mean, the list goes on and on and on. Alexis Texas was in there too, and the list goes on. He also had nicknames, and I was teaching class, and I had Crabtonicus in class, and Crabtonicus said to me, "You work with one of my good friends, Shoelaces." And I said, "Ooh, this is good." So he became known in the lab as Dr. Shoelaces. And Dr. Shoelaces capably trained everybody. He was the patient, the kind, the easygoing, the brilliant scientist. And then one day I'm in there and I see him rolling in, and he's got like a leather jacket on that has all these fringes hanging off and some strings like hanging down, and his hairs are in cornrows. And I go up to him and I go, "Kyler," and he goes, "It's MC Tapioca." And I said, so that's how I was introduced to MC Tapioca. And I have to say, MC Tapioca scared me a little bit. I like Dr. Shoelaces better. And then the other Kyler we had in there was Nigel Butters. And Nigel Butters was very conscientious. I think Nigel Butters worked on the CDC project, because Nigel was, always, and I would come, there's that old song, we're making plans for Nigel. And so I would come in and I would sing that little song to him. We're always making plans for Nigel, and he hated it because he knew it was going to be a bad project when I would say that to him. So this was probably about 2015, where we're doing some work I was doing an orientation. It was a summer orientation, had 3 new students, and one student who'd been there a while. Kyler called him Free Willy. And Free Willy was in there with us, and I finished up the orientation, and I said, we are, I guess, we're done downstairs, and that this was then our new lab that had moved on to campus, and it was on 4th floor, Cooley. And I said, now you guys are going to go upstairs and take a look at the view. And Free Willy, who's been in the lab for a while, turns to me and he says, "Oh, there's Free Willy back there, I see him." Free Willy turns to me and says, "So that's what you call him?" And I go, "What I call him?" And he says, "Kyler. He's stunning." And so he became known as The View. And Kyler, because he was modest, as we all know, he didn't like The View. The View, but all the interns loved The View. And so they would come into my office and say, hey, do I need to go talk to The View? And The View told me to come talk to you. And so it really stuck with him. But I will leave with that story, and just to say, we all had many, many, many versions of Kyler, and all these little nicknames, and in the end, it was just this one absolutely fabulous man that really touched all of us and just made all of our lives better. Thank you.
My name's Ben Herdon. I met Eric and Kyler in 2012 on a climbing trip in Spain. And they had their long hair and beards. And I was like, are these guys like the American Huber brothers? But with better teeth. So we'll start with his looks, Kyler's looks. I was talking to Eric a few years ago, and I was like, guys, in real life, movies are dumb. Guys don't really get hit on at bars. It doesn't happen. And he cuts me off. He's like, it happens to Kyler. Right away. So I was like, okay, well, And then a few years ago, Kyler did some modeling for a company, which surprised me, because he's so humble, and I don't think he cares about modeling. But he did it because he's nice, and he posed down for an afternoon, changing outfits and stuff. And I was like, well, what did you get out of it? Did they pay you? And he's like, well, I was supposed to get some clothes. And he's like, I got a pair of underwear. And at first I was like, well, that's lame. They should have given you more stuff. But then I realized that's what everyone wants to see him in. So now I'll talk about his humor. He had a great sense of humor, obviously. A lot of people know about that. But it was so good that he didn't actually have to speak. We were in a different trip in Spain. There was 5 of us in this tiny Euro car with 5 weeks of luggage for everyone in the car. So no one could move. You couldn't turn your head. Kyler was in the back left. I think I was in the back right, but I couldn't see him because there was so much stuff. And we were just driving, and then we hear a beer crack open somehow, and I was like, Kyler, it was like the funniest thing. So stuff like that, he would just quiet spoken. Half the time you'd miss it if you weren't listening. But always was good belly laughs. He was also very just humble, and I think more importantly than his humility even that I appreciated was his just genuineness. He never was trying to be, he never tried to get attention or was never trying to make impressions on people, which nowadays it's I think stands out even more with social media and all that junk. He was actually frustratingly humble for me as a photographer because I would try to get him out for climbing photos sometimes, and it's not that he didn't care, it's just that he was just doing his thing. And so I did get him out a couple times, so I'm pretty proud of that. But those are really the type of people that you want in your life and you want to work with, is people like Kyler, not people that are out for self-gain. And then obviously his smarts, which I didn't know about because he's humble. So, but yeah, he'll be very missed by a lot of folks, as family, as friend, and as a fantasy. So.
Hello. My name is Casey Ambrose, and I've been a friend of Kyler's for a long time. He's touched pretty much everyone in this room. And, I don't think there's any single word or combination of words that can really express the immense sense of loss everyone is feeling. But I wanted to tell a story about Kyler, kind of a humorous one, but I think it really highlights his character, who he was, what he valued, and I think why there's so many people in this room right now. So many of you are probably aware of Maiden Rocks climbing area, a couple hours away near Dillon, Montana. And I think there's probably enough people in this room that have never climbed before but know of Maiden Rocks, and that's probably all thanks to Kyler. So, in the springtime, you gotta take your vehicles and travel over dirt roads and stream crossings, and in the spring, it's often, there's a lot of runoff, and the streams can be pretty high. And you typically need a high clearance vehicle. And it was probably a weekend not unlike this. And we had made plans to go climbing and spend the weekend hanging out, having a good time, as a climber typically does. So my wife and I, we traveled there, had a truck fortunately, and it was like, oh, there's quite a bit of water here. So we pull into the meadows where everybody's camping and hanging around and milling about, and there's Kyler sitting outside his Subaru, which I think was Ty Nygaard's Subaru, and I think he bought it for $100 if I'm not mistaken. But there you have it. So there's Kyler standing there around a Subaru, and pretty much all of his worldly possessions are spread about in sort of a radius around the car, drying out apparently. And I got to talking to him, and I was like, so Kyler, what happened? He's like, well, the Subaru didn't make it. Couldn't make it through one of the puddles. It had apparently just drowned and died in one of the puddles. Fortunately, there was a well-meaning local guy there with a big truck, had a big tow strap, and, meets Kyler in the puddle and, yeah, we'll help you out. We'll tow him out. It's kind of the Montana way. I think a lot of you are familiar with that. And so I think Kyler had a decision to make at this point. He had to decide, should I get my vehicle towed back to the road where I can get things handled and maybe get the car fixed and sort of, this is going to affect the rest of my life. How do I get to work, etc. Or do I get my vehicle towed into Maiden Rocks where I can then spend the weekend climbing, hanging out with friends, and having a good time? And I think it's probably no surprise what decision Kyler would have made. He chose to get his vehicle towed deeper in so that he could climb, have fun, and, really spend time with the people, his community. And I think that's kind of the point of this story, and one of the things that, reminds me of Kyler. And why there's so many people in this room is that he really valued his friends, his family, and his community. And he often made decisions that valued those things. And it may have seemed unconventional, sort of a little against the flow, if you will, but looking back, he had a wisdom about him, and he made those decisions, and they were the right ones, I think. And he often forgoed kind of the easy path and made the decision to forge ahead against difficulty or inconvenience or whatever it was, often to spend time with friends or family. And I think we all knew that. We all have a story about meeting Kyler somewhere. It's cold, raining, whatever. The weather's crap. It's cold, and he would get after it. And he made you feel that, that was infectious. And I think we all sort of can feel that. So I think for me, when I think of Kyler and his spirit lives on, it just, reminds me to try to make that decision. Make the decision of, spend time with the ones you love and spend time doing the things that you love, because I think that's what enriches your life and makes it valuable. So that's all I got. Thanks.
Hi. I'm Laura. Most of you here know me as Fats. Kyler is my love. And I just wanted to tell you a bit about our time together. When my daughter Alice was 4 or so, she had her first dad's night at her preschool. I sent a message out to Alice's uncles, as we called the community of men here in Bozeman that support her, friends of her late father. As a single mother, I needed all the help and support I could get. I asked to volunteer so Alice could show off her school life to someone besides me. Kyler was the first to respond to the note I sent out. He grabbed at the chance to go with her. It was not always usual for Kyler to give a prompt response to a text, as probably many of you know, but I think he really wanted this job. I was a little shocked at his eagerness, but pleased. He was a favorite. And Kyler and Alice were good buddies, kindred spirits. A few days later, I drove the two of them to school, dropped them off. I remember Kyler asking me, "What do I do?" "I don't know," I said. "You go color with her, maybe. I'm sure she'll tell you, or you can just follow the other dads." And you can bet she did tell him all the things. They didn't need to follow anyone. They were naturals. She'd always been comfortable with Kyler. Maybe it was his gentle manner, or his smile, or his quiet, accepting tone. Probably it was the fact that he rarely said no. But I remember watching them slip into the school, holding hands, Alice chattering away about what she planned to show him. I'm pretty sure she was making sure he knew all the rules. Him gently tipping his head and muttering small quips back to her. Walking slowly, they never looked back at me. Sitting in the truck that snowy night, my heart burst with a million tiny explosions, lip quivering, tears streaming down my face, watching his big hand hold her little tiny one. It was one of the most special things in the world to me. I knew what I was watching was something unique and unique to us, but maybe I didn't yet know how big it really was. The world had handed Alice a tough lot, losing her dad at just 1 year, and she needed someone like Kyler. At that time, it was hard to project into the future, but I had a feeling in my stomach that evening that I was watching some sort of rescue. It was something I didn't quite understand, at least not yet, how it would unfold. Our time together initially was about Alice and Kyler and animals, and about him making me laugh. Most of the time, I was an outsider to Kyler and Alice's special world, an observer, and I loved that. They played and wrestled, acted like dragons, a lot, and watched more TV than I liked. They weighed animals on the scale. They played chess. They loved to ski together in the winter and explore in the summer. And every Christmas, they chopped down Christmas trees together. Eventually, Kyler started coming to our house on the regular for dinner. It's flat out where we are, so you can see his truck lights coming from far down the road. And we were ready when he showed up. On those nights, Alice and the dogs would all be waiting on the porch by the time he pulled in the drive. She would yell, and the dogs would whine and yowl. I could always hear his goofy laugh as he would come up the stairs to the porch, greeting. Sometimes there might be a dragon booby trap set to scare him, and then I would hear him shout and mumble profanities under his breath. Sometimes a bouquet of flowers from Alice, some sort of project waiting on the table. And later, after lots of play, Alice would go to bed. Then, with Hank, our dog, on his lap, he'd sit for a few hours at the dinner table and talk with me. Usually old stories about times long gone, about the life of growing children and silly dogs, about the goings-on at the farm with the horses, about our friends and the usual town gossip, maybe details about trips he had planned, or what was new and happening at Maiden Rocks. What at first seemed like a life raft set out for my daughter, I eventually came to see was one for me. Kyler came to me in one of the hardest and darkest times in my life, and quietly, without expectation or pressure or even intention, gently carried me through to a new way of being. So over time, I fell completely and wholly in love with him. When love came to the two of us, it was slow and awkward and a little confusing, true to both our characters and true to that time in our lives. It was two dear friends who helped us get there. Something feeling similar to a grade school crush. Sitting at dinner one night with Esther, she told me that Bud had told her that Kyler had told him that he thought maybe the two of us had feelings for each other. Which in my heart I already knew. But now with this spoken information, I had the nerve to tell Kyler my own thoughts. And then the two of us found our way. Kyler was shy and unassuming, so unassuming. Many times I found myself wishing he would assume more. But he never did, and that's probably part of why I loved him so dearly. He had a lovely way of talking with Alice and I about Justin, her father, and who he was, sharing stories with us and listening to ours, rolling the past into our present. He was solid enough to carry that. After some time, we decided to tell Alice about our relationship. When I did tell her, she just shrugged her shoulders and said, "Yeah, I already know, Mama." In the way that children sometimes see things more clearly than adults. So then the three of us just went on our way in our own world that we didn't share much with anyone outside. And it was so sweet and so good, and one of the happiest times in my life, really. In some ways, it feels very strange to share this with you all now. It was all very private, but it seems pertinent and important to give some public proclamation of a strong and very real love and family. In a text exchange with Kyler, when he was in the hospital, I sent him a note about wanting to shout and yell from the treetops as loud as I could how much I loved him, for everyone in the world to hear, and how much I wanted to scream about the unfair nature of his illness. And he wrote back, "If you do, I'll sit at the bottom of the tree and scream as best I can how much I love you." A few days later, I lost my voice for no apparent reason. And he asked if it was from all the screaming at the world. Yes, I said, even though it was all silently in my head. So I guess here it is now, our shout out to the world about our love and commitment to each other. I made no mistake in choosing Kyler as mine, and I don't know that I will ever get over him. Life without Kyler is not very good for me. Elizabeth Kubler-Ross wrote on love and loss. Love, that thing that we have great difficulty even describing, is the only truly real and lasting experience of life. It's the only gift in life that is not lost. Ultimately, it's the only thing that we can really give. I like to share 2 poems for Jane. This is from Jane to Kyler. Our lives go on without you, but nothing is the same. We have to hide our heartache when someone speaks your name. Sad are the hearts that love you, silent are the tears that fall. Living here without you is the hardest part of all. You did so many things for us. Your heart was kind and true, and when we needed someone, we could always count on you. The special years will not return when we are all together, but with the love in our hearts, you walk with us forever. She would also like to say this. My mind still talks to you. My heart still looks for you, but my soul knows you're at peace. I miss you every single day. And Alice is going to come up for just a minute.
Alice, good job. Took a lot of courage. Thanks everyone that has spoke about Kyler today. It was good to hear those stories, share those stories, have a laugh, have a cry. It's wonderful to see everybody here. We have a slideshow. Where's Jason at? Right there. For you guys to sit back and see some great images of Kyler and video and yeah, just sit back and enjoy these images. Thanks.